In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 412 of our ongoing exploration of the immersive cosmos. This week, our guests are Barry Through, the executive and artistic director of Gray Area, and Vanessa Chang, the director of programs at Leonardo. Both are here to talk about the upcoming Gray Area Festival coming up in San Francisco, October 19th through the 22nd. It's a great conversation about tech, art, access, and the changing cultural landscape of the SF Bay Area. I've never talked to these two before, and we had a grand old time. This is a fun one. Over on the website, you'll find that we've been up to all kinds of shenanigans this week. A huge rundown with 8 reviews hailing from many immersive hotspots, a feature review of the new site-specific opera from LA's The Industry, and we kick off a brand new feature coming soon, which puts the spotlight on upcoming experiences and events. Naturally, we start with Berlin's only queer haunt, Nightcrawlers. We've already got more lined up for next week. Speaking of next week, as I'm recording this, there are just 20 spots left to RSVP for this coming Monday's meetup at the Roguelike Tavern in Burbank. We'll be doing a live taping of the show that night, and our guests will be the Speakeasy Society, Scarlett Kim talking about an exciting event coming to Arizona State University's Mix Center, Roguelike owner John McCormick will also be there, and there's 2 score worth of incredible people who'll be coming out that night. Gathering in the community is always a good time. RSVP for free, drop a donation if you feel like it, and come on down to the Roguelike for drinks and grub and gabbing. 21 and over for this one, folks, just to be clear. Now, Patreon is, well, it's been being hinky these days, as you might have heard. Changing their logo, changing the rules, making free memberships, yada yada. But look, that thing is still the main way we keep this thing going, and somehow the math has worked out, so we are now 17 paid members away from our spooky season goal of 450. It is so close. If we could just convert a few of the free members, there's like 40 of them right now, into paid members, and I don't know, maybe people think that somehow magically money appears, or that, things occur. But if we could just get 17 of you, of like the 40, we'd be pretty good. Got to convert like half. Pressure's on. That's the weird news. The good news is that we count 6 new backers who are helping us keep the churn away. And we do that 3 more times. We hit our number. The folks this week are Paul Paquette, Chris Dolan, Stacy Fitzpatrick, Saturnine99, Benjamin Hageland, and Leonie Ermer. Thank you all for joining up. It means so much, particularly when we're doing a drive. Now, I just have to figure out what to do with this free tier when we already give away just about everything we do, because we're like a kind of a volunteer / one man / 6 people public media thing. Because anyway, look, patreon.com/NoProscenium is where you go to help us out. And if you've done that already, if you're already a paid member, the best way to help us is to share this podcast, one of the articles you found useful. Maybe it's the call sheet. Maybe you're excited about the coming soon. Share what we do and help people discover more immersive stuff. That's why we exist. Do it on your social media platform of choice. We are always No Proscenium, except on Insta and on Threads, where we are No_Proscenium. see you online. Finally, big thanks, as always, to our sustaining backers. Those are the folks who pay the bulk of our bills. Samuel Mystery, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Cameo Wood, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Gentis, Kurt Collins, Winthorne, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hanson, Lecker LaCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. Thank you all for being a part of this. And hey, if you have something special you want to share with this incredible group of people, these over 400 paid backers, hit us up at noah@noproscenium.com and let's talk about it. Let's get you hooked into our ecosystem. All right. And with that, let's get into this week's interview. Joining us today are Barry Threw, the Executive and Artistic Director of Gray Area, hosts of the 9th edition of the Gray Area Festival in San Francisco that is coming up October 19th through the 22nd, and Vanessa Chang, the Director of Programs at Leonardo, who run the CripTech Incubator and who is collaborating with Gray Area on the festival on the CripTech Metaverse Lab to talk with us about this year's festival, the lab, and the origins of both. Barry, Vanessa, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, delighted to be here.
Nice to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Barry, let's start with the absolute basics and start with you. For those listening who don't know, what is the Gray Area Festival?
Yeah, so Gray Area Festival is the kind of yearly, I would say, flagship event of Gray Area, which is is a San Francisco-based nonprofit cultural incubator. We're in our 15th year now, operating in San Francisco, and we focus on art and technology applied towards social impact, which we do in many ways. One is as an event venue. We do audiovisual performances. Some of which are kind of surround immersive things that would be of interest to the No Proscenium audience, which we can get a little more into. But we also do education and have incubator and research programs. So this festival is the 9th annual Gray Area Festival. And sometimes we have no themes or just broad overviews of things. This year, our theme is called Plural Prototypes, and we're really talking about reimagining sort of cultural infrastructure that facilitates these deep and meaningful collaborations among diverse social groups, which we do to support our overall mission at Gray Area, which is bringing as broad an array of backgrounds and perspectives into media technology, the things that we develop in the world, making sure that they benefit the greatest possible sort of set of humanity, so yeah.
So Vanessa, can you tell us about your part with Leonardo in this year's festival, this CripTech Metaverse Lab? And I know there's going to be a lot to unpack with the incubator and sort of the origins of this, but for folks who are going to be coming to, or might be thinking about coming to check out the festival, what exactly will they encounter?
Sure. So this year, Leonardo, particular program CripTech Incubator, collaborated with Gray Area to produce the CripTech Metaverse Lab. This was a gathering of 10 disabled creatives working variously in sound art, XR, dance, sculpture, of various disciplines. And we gathered them to experience immersive works in spatial audio, in virtual reality, and in augmented reality, with the idea that we wanted to create a generative environment to experience what are called access frictions, which is when media and technology and infrastructure don't create avenues for access for all folks. And so, a lot of times this access frictions emerge out of kind of design failures. They fail to account for all potential users from the get-go. And so our lens that we bring, this is in the CripTech Metaverse Lab as well as the CripTech Incubator, is what we call creative access or aesthetic access. This idea that access isn't simply about, say, I don't know, tacking a ramp onto a building, but a creative and generative community practice where if you bring people together, they can kind of collectively build avenues for not just, getting into a building, for experiencing artworks. So over the 3 days, these artists and creatives had these experiences. As expected, encountered a lot of barriers along the way to experiencing work, and in virtual reality, augmented reality, and spatial audio, because they often don't account for folks who might be deaf or blind or have are mobility device users. So there's a number of ideas and recommendations that came out of that, and as well as a commissions process. So collaborating with Vive Arts and Viveverse, as well as New Art City, the Metaverse Lab commissioned 3 artists, Indira Allegra, Melissa Mels-Kuhn, and Nat Decker, to create metaverse prototypes that lean into creative access, and that start to kind of envision a more accessible, kind of collectively imagined and realized metaverse. And so that's what you'll see at Gray Area Festival, these prototypes.
Event, and all 3 of them are going to be in VR in like a Vive port setup.
So two of the works, Melissa Mels-Kuhn's Deaf Club, as well as Indira Allegra's Tixeri, will be in Viveverse and experienced through Viveverse headsets. And the third, and they'll also be projected onto a screen so that you can kind of see what's happening. And then the third piece is it's created on New Art City, which is an open source virtual platform, and that's Nat Decker's Touch. So for this project, New Art City has worked to kind of create headset capacity for the experience, and so I believe that they'll also be using the Vive headsets.
I want to drill into the origins of the CripTech Incubator a little bit. I noted there was an exhibition in 2020, right before the pandemic hit us all.
Oh my
Recoding,
goodness, 2 weeks before.
yeah, and like I'm my listeners know like that was a critical moment for us as well. So I'm always interested to hear the war stories. Like, was that the
Mhm.
first time that the folks at Leonardo had pulled this particular initiative together, or was this part of like a longer chain that was going? I'm kind of interested in the relationship between like that curation in 2020 and what's happening at the
Mhm.
festival this year.
For sure. Well, it is certainly part of that lineage. So that exhibition was an exhibition I co-curated with Lindsay Felt. Is a longtime collaborator of mine, and we were really interested in merging kind of 3 um, discursive practice spaces that we thought really needed to speak to each other. And that's this idea in this field of like disability and technology, because, on one hand, you've got this, when people talk about disability and technology, they have a way of thinking about it in a kind of curative or rehabilitative sense, that technology is meant to cure or fix disability. But actually, the history of technology is a different kind of history. It's a history of disability innovation, of this, trying to forge access where it hasn't been created with access in mind, right? Like the whole internet really is a history of deaf innovation. ARPANET and DefNet are kind of fundamentally connected. YouTube captions are were developed by a deaf engineer who was also part of DefNet in the 70s and 80s. So that thread. And then we were also interested in highlighting Bay Area disability activism and the kind of ways in which disability art and activism have really been emergent from Berkeley and San Francisco, and how that might speak to innovation in Silicon Valley. And then finally, art and technology and its kind of capacity for media art to foster a kind of multimedia sensory experiences, like how can we create more access? So we curated that show, and it created a lot of interesting questions for us. In a way, it was like a proto lab and a proto incubator. From there, we then started working with Leonardo, and that's when the CripTech incubator came to life. We really leaned into this notion that access had to be cultivated, that we needed to develop more of a pipeline for disability innovation in art and technology. And we've been working on that over the last few years. And a lot of the thinking around access and creative access in technology is oriented around often it's like haptics as an avenue for experience, or if you're thinking about VR, there's a way of kind of like thinking about folks who may not be able to leave their homes, so being able to kind of access experience that way. But this kind of often has echoed this thinking about access is putting the ramp on the building, compliance. So we're trying to really work in this more creative and innovative way, and that led us to this collaboration with Gray Area, CripTech Metaverse Lab, because we're at this, as you know, um, fascinating moment for XR where everything is still being made. Experiences are great and they work, and sometimes they don't work. So it's a really primo moment to um, integrate the experiences and perspectives all along the design cycle of people um, who not only would benefit from being able to create and use and experience these platforms, but to shape them for the better and for like really in really creative ways.
I'm gonna put a pin in sort of the state of XR at the moment, because I think hopefully we'll have time to come back to that, because I got some questions for you there. But I want to pivot to Barry. Gray Area has been around. This is 15th anniversary. You've basically started up around the time I was leaving the Bay, because I'm Bay raised, if not born, and I'm curious as to both in terms of the story of Gray Area and your perception of sort of the intersection of art and tech in the Bay, because that's always been a robust tradition in the Bay Area in San Francisco. And like every time I think of Gray Area and some of the shenanigans I hear you get up to, I get myself a strong 90s vibe, occasionally a little bit of survival research labs vibe out of some of the imagery I've seen. And I'm wondering sort of how you perceive where things have gone over the arc of 15 years. Just a really simple question about, the origins of Gray Area, the state of art and tech in the Bay. Nothing broad.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a big question because San Francisco's clearly
Yeah.
changed a lot over the last 15 years. But I will say that the Bay Area has a many decade history of art and technology collaboration. And, I think there's a strong argument to be made that the economic miracle that's happened in San Francisco is one that occurred because of a creative milieu. It was really a creative technology project and not just sort of a capital project, right? Which has over time become kind of a more extractive sort of thing. Um, and so, Gray Area exists to kind of to hold this conversation around how um, not only art, but creativity broadly, and what we call anti-disciplinary practice, which is breaking down knowledge silos and sharing experiences across knowledge domains, and making this point that artists are really the cultural first responders that can kind of show up, expand the aperture of possibilities when looking at any sort of challenge, find edge cases. And we think that artistic practice, and we use art broadly because we also, welcome all sorts of, not only backgrounds and perspectives, but also vocations, skill sets into the story there. So I would say, from the beginning, Gray Area has done a lot of kind of immersive audiovisual work. Both myself and Gray Area have worked for a long time with Recombinant Media Labs, which has a project called the Cine Chamber, which is a 10-screen surround, 8-channel surround sound system that features probably about 60 full-length works from international artists like Ryoichi Kurokawa and Robert Hinke and Tarek Berry and Vicky Bennett, who goes by the name People Like Us, and Signal, like a whole lot of different artists. We've had projects like the Hexadome from the ISM Berlin. And we talked about the pandemic a little bit. So in 2019, we actually had a year-long project that from 2018 to 2019 with the Knight Foundation supported a project called the Experiential Space Research Lab, where we were looking at how the new, what at the time was a renewed trend in experiential exhibitions, and how that sort of stuff could be applied towards more than just set design and like Museum of Ice Cream style stuff, but how it could be used as a site for interdisciplinary collaboration applied towards engaging with real world issues. So we had a project there over 6 months, we took a group of artists, designers, ecologists, and did a 6-month immersive deep dive into Gaia theory. And the artists self-generated an exhibition called The End of You, which was, instead of a selfie museum, more of an anti-selfie museum, talking about how to expand people's sense of identity to other people and other species and a whole living planet. And we had that scheduled for February of 2020, and then all of a sudden the door shut. So after that point, like everyone, we've also done a lot of sort of VR related works through the past. And so we weren't exclusively a physically place-based kind of immersive shop in terms of interest. But it caused us, like everyone, to sort of think more about online collaboration. A lot of that stuff is appearing at the festival this year. So in addition to the CripTechThe Metaverse lab projects, we also have featuring some prototypes from a lab called Sea Change, which has been running for a couple of years, that we're doing in partnership with the Goethe Institute. It's focused on cross-cultural exchange, particularly with new sorts of online tools that facilitate cultural exchange among different groups. We have content from a project we're doing with Filecoin Foundation from the Decentralized Web. So these decentralized web projects, we're doing education to teach artists and creators how to use and contextualize their work within the new generation of decentralized web tools, which gives certain affordances, which have sort of been talked about a lot these days. And the CripTechThe project isn't just another example of how do we put artists and creators forward first, and not only to sort of define the possibilities of these new tools, which we think both makes them stronger, more robust kind of worlds for everyone, but also sees them as it's not only what are the kind of technical challenges with giving everyone access with these tools, but also how can the tools themselves be speculative design sort of canvases to envision um, new forms of access and increasing access for everyone, even beyond what may be possible in, chained to physical reality. So I don't know if that answered your question, but there
Yeah, I
were some
guess it
thoughts.
definitely gives me like the splash up of like sort of the projects you're on. It also gives me a sense of regret that like for me your rise has sort of been for me like ships passing in the night, because like I left the bay just about the time y'all were probably like, doing something south of Market somewhere, and like I'm sitting there going like, oh, yeah, if I was still living in San Pablo, I probably would have like be going over to the gray area stuff like
Yeah.
on the regular, right? Like no, I really got that sense. I was like, oh yeah, I think I would have been hanging out there for the past like decade if I was still like living in the Bay. Um, I'm curious as to, we're particularly when you're talking about like this, and this is for both of you. You were talking about the you did a whole project looking at experiential and there's resurgence in experiential exhibition, and so much of that was a response to like the curiosity and some of the audiences and some of the success that people were having with things like the Museum of Ice Cream, right? Like lots of people coming through this stuff. What's your sense for both of you on the pulse in the Bay Area right now when it comes to whether or not audiences are interested in experiential and immersive, or are they kind of burned out at this point because they've seen one too many Van Gogh, immersive Van Gogh pitches. They've been too much of that stuff, and now they just want a nice simple, I don't know, I don't even know what they want. Like, but I asked this question because I think there's this anxiety in the creative community about whether or not this was all a fad, or if there's some deeper desire, or even a deeper possibilities that are in this form that people are responding to. Again, a
Yeah.
simple question.
Yeah.
But
Sure.
very
Maybe I'll say a couple of things about that first and
yeah.
pass it over to Vanessa. I mean, I think there are a couple of things baked in. There are a couple of things that are San Francisco baked into that question, but I think the largest point is probably that immersive environments are really not. Your question is, is it a fad? And I would say it's more of a return to form. If you look in the past at
Nice, nice.
something like the caves at Lascaux, go way back, right? And the way art was created was site specific, and it had an experiential quality to it by definition. So you had the light in the cave walls, all this sort of stuff, the geometry of it all contributed to the experience of viewing the artwork. And this is true with, you can make lots of cathedrals and all sorts of other things, all sorts of practices all around the world that are really art was viewed experientially and place site specific based. So it's really only when art starts to be particularly commodified, um, and has sort of exchange value that you start to see this uh, white room full of objects.
Mm,
So I think that this shift that we saw, 2018-ish, 2017, um, for people being interested once again in environments as opposed to objects, um, is more of a return rather than like a fad or aberration, right? And I think that trend is both online and offline and virtually going to continue, um, in the sense that I think we're also moving from what I would say is an experience economy towards a transformation economy, where even more than just having an experience, people want to enter and leave, having taken something away, been given further agency, learned something, being transformed, getting some grounding and orientation that actually engages with things in the world through the lens of the experience that they've been through, because we're in such a disorienting time. I think there's always this tension between sort of escape and engagement. At Gray Area, we always tip the dial towards engagement rather than exclusively having like entertainment experiences or like, branded, like that sort of stuff. In San Francisco particularly, I think there's almost it's too complex of a thing to really dig totally into, because the audience has changed drastically over the years, and recent, like the pandemic has changed, remote work, everything, the audience has shifted a lot. And right now we're particularly having this case where, I would say there's one big potential good news for immersive entertainment, and that is that there's whatever 600,000 square feet of commercial real estate available in the city that can't, particularly downtown and south of Market. And if there's anything that San Francisco understands, it's art and culture as a real estate development move. And so there's already been a lot of conversation in the city about, oh, now it's art's turn to save the city from its economic collapse. It's driven by a whole lot of things that aren't art and culture's fault. And so I think that, that's both a large scale sort of city development challenge, because San Francisco is not a city that, and the technology companies who, in general, the philanthropy dollars here don't really find art and culture as their first choice, which I think is a real problem, because it ends up eroding the cultural infrastructure, which I think is one of the reasons that ultimately created that, was a foundational component of the situation we find ourselves in now. And I think without supporting and revitalizing the cultural space here, and if there's one, and this is also true of the arts organizations here, insofar as if there's one conversation San Francisco should be able to be a leader on Earth, it's the conversation around the relationship between culture and technology.
Right.
And through both the cultural space and the technology space, the either resources or interest in that conversation is, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, but it's still remarkable to me that Gray Area is really the only, and I would say, Leonardo's in Oakland. They've been doing this since the 60s too, with the journal and other things. I can let Vanessa talk about that, because it's one of the reasons this partnership makes sense. But in terms of a brick and mortar sort of venue like we have, we're really the only dedicated organization working on that topic in San Francisco, which is always remarkable to me.
Yeah, there's always been this thing in the Bay of like, you feel like there are things that should exist and yet somehow don't exist. And
Yeah.
like, and I
there's
always,
there's a lot that does exist that nobody knows. But like I've said, we've worked with like Recombinant Media Labs. The artistic director of Recombinant Media Labs, whose name is Not Human, and you should talk to at some point on this podcast for sure, has been doing audience immersive and experiential and surround works in San Francisco since 1970.
Yeah. Well, there's always been this
like,
tension between like the San Francisco underground, particularly post 60s, and the wild experiential stuff that's been going on in there, and the outside culture, to the point where like there were things that were being built that were like secreted, and then like when they were, because they were like trespass type experiences, and when they were finally under threat, people wanted to go public with them in order to preserve them. But at the same time, they had, not been part of the rest of the fabric of the city. So it's always
Mhm.
been funky, right? Like this
Yeah, it's a
tension.
little bit. Yeah, the city's always been a little balkanized culturally in some
Yeah.
strange ways that don't that I'm not even having experienced it over 20 years here. I'm not. It doesn't exactly make sense to me still. But
Well, it's also like something to do with, I mean, you're talking about this tension, but there's also this cycle of tension and extraction and assimilation, right? Like, I mean, you look at the entire history of like the whole world, whole Earth catalog,
Yeah.
and the emergence of Wired, and then you look at Wired now, and the way in which what is outside and kind of counterculture becomes absorbed into, techno culture, and that kind of really animating a lot of these tensions and a lot of these shifts in the landscape of the Bay Area. We talk about like it's interesting. You're asking about the appetite for immersive in the Bay Area, and I mean Barry touched on a lot of really, I think, critical stuff there. But to me, there's this kind of desire embedded in a lot of immersive work and in the kind of staging of immersive work, that comes from a real vein of techno utopianism in the Bay Area too, right? Like the appetite's always going to be there because there's something that, on one hand, there's this sense of utopia that is possible. I mean, maybe it's mirage, but this moving towards it through technological means, and as the world starts to get really difficult to be in. I think about the surging of immersive media and the period you're talking about, and it's at a time when we're all stuck inside because of the pandemic, or we can't, or because of forest fires and the air is no good. So you
Mhm.
start to have it to transform the world around you, and that I think is it's kind of particular to this historical moment, but it's also kind of very um, in practice something that's very of a piece with the history of this work in the Bay Area.
Yeah, I love that you brought up like the fire conditions, right? Like, that was like the precursor. The first mask I ever bought was because of a bad fire season we were having down here. And then I remember in like the year before the pandemic, maybe it was 2018, like when the skies turned red in the Bay.
No, that
Must
was
have been
2020.
that was 2020.
It was during the
2020.
pandemic,
Oh my gosh.
September 2020.
Oh wowzers. Like just the way that like we're getting fractured, and yet and that and somehow, and to some degree, like the internet also fractured us, right? Like, put us socially more connecting through digital means, and there's this countervailing desire to connect in person, or if you're online, to have a deeper connection somehow, to like
Right.
open up the bandwidth of
Yeah, and and we've spent 20 years staring at our phones too, which is like
yeah.
the smallest possible straw you can suck a like experience through, right? So given given just our like staring at these like objects, which are kind of collapsing our peripheral sense.
Mhm.
It's as a media object, though, that also I think translates into the desire to have these sort of like higher bandwidth, more encompassing environments that
Hmm.
have sort of more affordances, because it's just not a
Yeah.
good life experience to be focused on that sort of like low bandwidth kind of like
Yeah.
Well, and there seems to
division.
be.
Well, I think too that's why, I mean, in a way, disabled people
Yeah.
are such experts in doing this work. I think this moment of the pandemic where we're all sitting in isolation and we can't, um, suddenly we're denied access to places, and we're having to look live through a screen, and all experiences are going virtual. I mean, um, this is for many people who may not be able to leave their homes, who have maybe various physical impairments. I mean, this is just the state of being, right? So they've been practicing for this for a long time. I mean, there's Alice Wong, who is a Bay Area-based writer and activist, calls disabled people oracles because they're experiencing the future that we're all headed towards now.
Mm.
And so this kind of moment right now when we're talking about like the CripTech metaverse, this this is expertise that we're calling on, that the people have really been in a way training for. They haven't wanted to, but but they've had to, because the world hasn't been built for them, and now we're all starting to live in that world.
Yeah. Um, Vanessa, Barry mentioned, Leonardo's been around in Oakland since the 60s, the 70s. Could you tell us a little about the organization?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, Leonardo actually was founded as a journal in
Okay.
1967, and it's still being published. That's published by MAT Press. It was the very first journal dedicated to art, science, and technology practice, and it was founded by Frank Molina, who is a rocket scientist who also co-founded NASA JPL and a kinetic artist. Just didn't do much. And
Yeah, those rocket
after
scientists always doing nothing extracurricular at all.
right. And he founded the journal in the 60s, kind of at this moment when you see like EAT and LACMA's art and technology program. So at that particular kind of moment in art and technology. And then in 1983, his son, Roger Molina, who's now a professor at UC Dallas and is still involved with the organization, founded the nonprofit in Oakland. So we've been, as an organization, we're founded in Oakland and grounded in Oakland, but we have a real global reach. And we have a partnership with Arizona State University as well. We've got, in terms of our publications and gatherings and salons, people meet under the Leonardo banner in almost 70 countries globally, and we're read in over 100 countries. So we're kind of characterizing ourselves as a kind of think tank doing work kind of programmatically and in our publications. With our partners, we work in various residencies. So we really work along the entire axes of creative development in art, science, and technology.
Yeah, if only our rocket scientists today would create art,
right?
science, technology journals instead of whatever else they might.
Well, those aren't real rocket scientists who are doing that. The real rocket scientists are working for those people and wishing they could work somewhere else. Yeah. So we just got to nationalize a couple of things. It's no big deal.
Here we go. Yes. Now we're talking.
We'll get it done.
Seriously.
Is the no proscenium audience aware that profit is the unpaid wages of the working class? Or
I mean, a lot of them are. Some of them may be laboring. Put quotes on laboring under the impression that it's not. But at the end of the day.
I'm actually glad. I'm glad Vanessa mentioned the Whole Earth catalog and publications too, because this wasn't something I had planned to talk about today, but I've been undertaking a project for the last couple of years to digitize and make publicly available the sort of entire corpus of Whole Earth publications, which includes not only the catalogs, but also things that aren't normally seen, like maybe not known about, like the Coevolution Quarterly and the Whole Earth Review and Whole Earth Magazine. And there were a bunch of sort of one-off special publications like Space Colonies and Soft Tech and things like that. And those should be released on October 13th online, together with partners like the Internet Archive and Long Now Foundation and Stuart Brands and a lot of the other editors are involved with that, the Point Foundation. Yeah. And so keep on a lookout. Keep on a lookout for that.
Yeah, this episode should be dropping on the 13th. So if it does drop, that could be perfect.
Yeah. So that website will be at wholeearth.index. And it will not be up until the 13th. And so
Whole Earth .index. I'm just making a note of that for all folks. If it's live when this goes up, it'll be in the show notes. So
Cool.
don't
That's great.
about that. He says, but luckily I wrote it down in the place where I'm going to harvest something else. So like that information will get consistent. Are you? Does that also mean that that some of the well is going to be in that collection?
No, the well is not a part of that.
Okay, all right. Other people
I mean,
have the rights
the well's still online.
Oh.
I mean, you can still join up. You can still get an email address at well.com if you want. It's the well exists.
So for those who don't know, the well is the Whole Earth Electronic Link. That's WELL, electronic being short for electronic. And it was like the precursor to even like CompuServe. So it was a very early internet,
BBS,
early in practically a RAPANET service and kind of watering hole, and was for a college kid in the 90s, it was sort of a legendary spot that you couldn't quite figure out how to get to. So again, you're telling me it's around. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. And that's the thing about the internet. Sometimes like, oh, that place that was like a legendary speakeasy. Yeah, it's just around this alley over here. If you only would like leave the big mall they put up 10 years ago, you'd find it. So yeah. Well, this has been fantastic. Is there, as we come on the close of our time, anything else that folks should know about the programming, particularly of the festival, or a case to be made to kind of come out and check out some of the work, or sort of, I guess, what's the vibe? Like, how are they going to find like-minded, techno art weirdos
for sure. I think there's one thing about Gray Area Festival is I think we keep it pretty casual in some ways, and so you meet a lot of people. We have performances at night. The conferences are in the day. We have workshops with the Sea Change Labs this year. We have an exhibition. And so all of those components go into kind of telling the whole story around, and presenting the work and sort of elevating the stuff that we want to talk about. It's always a great time. There's always ample time for conversations and socializing, and it's a great group of people. A lot of people come in from outside of San Francisco, but it's also a great place to connect with community here that are interested in these sorts of things. You can also watch all of the festival online. There's a virtual pass that I think is $50, and you can live stream everything. So if you don't happen to be able to come in, that's a great way to, or just want to like reduce your carbon footprint, that's a great way to engage. Ultimately, the prototypes from the CripTech Metaverse Lab we hope to be developing into full experiences that will be publicly available. It's a little bit TBD, but we're working with partners on that. I don't know. Anything I missed, Vanessa?
No, I think that about covers it. Tech art weirdos is
we have. In fact, that's all you'll find. If you're expecting anything else other than that, then like you'll be gravely disappointed. But it turns out, so the website GrayAreaFestival.io is the website. I think there will be early bird passes for a little bit longer, and then they'll go up a little bit in price. But we always the full festival access pass is $250, and we try and keep it as accessible as possible. We're not making a lot of money on this thing. We're just trying to get break even on it and get people in and show some cool work, and would love to see. We also, if there's anybody out there listening to this, we provide sort of scholarships and subsidies if you have any sort of need-based reason why that presents a barrier to you to come, then please get in touch with us and we'll see what we can do.
All right. Well, I encourage everyone who's in the Bay, who's hearing, to check it out. And if this is your lane and you are within reach of it, also, I would say, tap in and keep an eye out for that Whole Earth catalog action.
And if you can pay more, you're welcome to do that also.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's a couple of people listening who probably can.
Yeah.
There's not a lot, but also I want out of it, so you can just pay me more. No, no.
Exactly. Support No Proscenium.
Let's just spread the money around, or let's just hack into someone's account. So
we're talking about redistributing wealth immersively here.
Yes. We've got the biggest immersive project ever. It's called that anyway. Yeah, they'll hunt us down if we talked openly. Y'all, we talked about this in the meeting. We weren't supposed to talk about it publicly.
Yeah, it's like I'm on a list. So
yeah. I think they dropped me off the list. They got bored of me, so they dropped me off the list. So I wasn't doing anything interesting anymore. Right, on that note, oh boy. Barry, Vanessa, thank you both so much for coming by today, and let's keep this channel open.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Once again, thanks to Barry and Vanessa for being our guests on the show. Check the show notes for links to, well, all that I could find. Obviously, Gray Area and the Gray Area Festival and Leonardo and CripTech. All of that will be there. And hopefully, I haven't looked yet. Hopefully that whole Earth catalog project will be in the show notes as well. There is a lot going on. It is, of course, spooky season. There are, the Willows will be releasing a whole new slate of tickets here in Southern California. You can check the site soon for information about that. Those go up on the 15th. On the 16th, we've got our meetup here in SoCal. The Immersive is coming up in Denver in November. There's just this and that and the other thing. I'm going to be doing like a lot of travel over the next few weeks. Most of it, people summoning me to be, actually everything being people summoning me to be places. I never control my own travel, but I'm doing way more in the next couple of months. And my CalArts class is still going, and the students are making really interesting stuff and, challenging the way we think about immersive and talk about immersive and some of the framing. And so that's good. That's sharpening me up. So look for some changes as we go on. Speaking of some things that got sharpened up, the how to get covered by NoPro section, because we've added this new coming soon feature, which is instantly going to have a cousin called Now Playing, because of the Willows, actually. Because we have that, I needed to mix up how that was and sort of make some stuff clear, because there's some folks have some ambiguity because about, well, what does it mean to be listed at EI? Someone reached out this week and was like, hey, like they don't, my friends had a thing and they don't see it like on EI. And I'm like, what do you mean don't see it? Like, here it is in the listings. And they were thinking it was going to get curated. Well, that's a different process. That's a whole thing. So if you want to know how to get your shows covered, how to get into the newsletter, how to get on the site, what qualifies something for review or a feature or this or that, the other thing, then go check out, and I'll put it in the show notes, go check out the revised How to Get Covered by NoPro, because that's the way to do it. That is how to approach us. A lot of people approach us. We get a lot of pitches, a lot of press releases. And so most of the time, the answer just has to be no. One of the reasons why we have the new coming soon feature, where we have the i5 and a few of these other things, or to make it easier for us to say yes, just because if we just process press releases, there'd be no time to do anything else. So there you go. That's what's up with that. That's enough for me for now. I got some logistical things that need doing. I'm looking at the oh my God. Okay. I got a lot of logistical things I need to do here on Thursday night, so I'm going to go do those. I hope you have a most excellent weekend ahead if you're listening to this on Friday, or that you're having a good weekend if you're listening to this on Saturday. Don't forget to check the newsletter. There'll be plenty in it. I know I got to make it tomorrow because it doesn't stop. All right, let's do the credits, shall we? The associate producer of this podcast is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. All of this that you perceive is my fault. I'm Noah Nelson, and until next time, I'll see you at the show.